Oh, I don't think I want to hear that.
Too late. I've started dancing now. Once we've started, we can't stop.
Welcome back, it's Rich, and in this episode, Rich reviews Wonka. Let's do it. Welcome back to Rich Reviews, no nonsense movie chat from the UK. If you like what you see today, don't forget to check out my other videos. Feel free to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. I'll try and keep this one light and spoiler free, but be careful if you want to go in knowing nothing. I'm not giving anything away and generalising more about the film than revealing key points or moments. So Wonka, the big film for the Christmas holiday season, just dropped in the UK a week earlier than the US release of Friday 15th of December, and comes from Paddington 1 and 2 director Paul King. The film stars Timothée Chalamet as the famous and peculiar titular character on what promises to be an adventure and fun of the best of British actors and comedy, accompanying our hero's journey to becoming the famous chocolate maker. This is a clear prequel to the original 1971 Gene Wilder version, with a hint of Johnny Depp's 2005 quirkiness thrown in. And I do stress a clear prequel. More on that later. It's a totally standalone film, though, to the other two mentioned. It could possibly go more against the Gene Wilder version, as that one didn't offer any backstory at all to Wonka's past, bar the mention of Lumperland. Whereas Tim Burton's version had heavy backstory and flashbacks, which I thought were great scenes with Wonka in awesome braces and his creepy Dracula dentist father, which has no resemblance to any of this new film's backstory in the slightest. I sat in a cinema packed with kids on opening night, not my usual venue, so just sank down to try and block out the phones and giggling and give this one a fair chance, as I very much do like both of the other ones, and we've seen it all before, particularly though the Gene Wilder take on the role. So the plot follows our eccentric candy creator on his journey to produce the finest chocolate in the world and to open his first candy store in a town where chocolate is king and kind of ruled in sorts by a trio of chocolate makers, those being the excellent Patterson Joseph as Slugworth, Matthew Bainton as Fickelgruber and Matt Lucas as Prodnose. In this town, chocolate's almost like a drug and is used for bribery and all manner of things, and so Wonka's flavours of such epic creation and super cheap prices pose great threat to the already established posh and rich trio of anti-heroes, and they want him out. Following a run-in with Olivia Colman's Mrs. Scrubbit and Tom Davis's Bleacher, Wonka finds himself working in a linen mill alongside Downton's own Jim Carter as Abacus Crunch, and it's here where he also meets his kind of sidekick, Noodle, played by the fantastic Carla Lane. Together, Wonka, Noodle, Abacus and the rest of the workers team up to ensure the dream of opening the Wonka store becomes a reality, and so our adventure begins, to sell the greatest chocolate the world has ever tasted. It's a tough movie to take on this, and a tough role to take on, regardless that this is a prequel, as the original 1971 film on Gene Wilder is such a classic with such a magnificent main lead that despite this being a prequel, this will still always be compared to that one at the very least. Certainly the character of Wonka himself, if nothing else, despite, again, this being a different story and not a remake at all. So was it sweet like chocolate, or was everything just a little too sugar-coated for my taste? Let's talk about what worked. So the big question will be from everyone, how was Timothée Chalamet as Wonka? Well, I've got to say I thought he was outstanding as the main lead that we're familiar with. He was great. Yes, he's very different to that of Gene Wilder and Johnny Depp, but he's a different person, and he is, and supposed to be, a lot younger in this too, being a prequel. But he does often still quote lines or quips from both previous versions, just to give that feel that he too is a much younger but actual Willy Wonka. He was the main person in this that I wasn't sure about from a casting point of view, but for me, he really does pull this off perfectly, and he's a great alternate version of this character. He looks fantastic too, in his vibrant coat, his hat, his mannerisms, and he really puts on some effort for a great show for the audience. He's got a massive energy and emotion, enthusiasm and happiness throughout the whole film, and it really shines in every scene. He's also a very naive character with this constant enthusiasm to succeed, which often leads to him finding himself in trouble, and thus creating the various action-esque set pieces or situations that move the story along. By far, he is not the outright awkward, peculiar version of Depp, nor is he the more relaxed and slightly deranged version of Wilder. He's very much his own take, a brilliantly clever and clear young mind, full of positive energy, ready to take on anything to succeed. He's more like a normal person, whereas the other two previous characters were just real strange oddballs. Full props then to Timothée Chalamet. I'd take my hat off to him, and I'd be more than happy to see him in a sequel too. The entire supporting cast too are great in their own roles. Olivia Colman and Tom Davis as Mrs. Scrubbage and Bleacher. They both provide the absolute best of British and clearly had great fun making this movie. They reminded me of a kind of Oliver Twist style Fagin character and setup in how they work, their grimy setting and the forced London accent that most of the cast kind of provide, I suppose. And like the Oliver Twist film, it's a stark contrast to the rest of the town's posh end, where everything's clean and shiny and everyone's in their suits. Olivia Colman's 100% solid gold, first class in everything she's in, and her ability to be a character changes considerably from movie to movie or TV show to show, never giving the same performance twice, unlike examples such as Melissa Carthy or Tom Cruise, both who I've spoke about recently, and both are just themselves in pretty much every film they're in, whether it's reality or a film. Again, in this, she puts out an outstanding performance and works excellently alongside Tom Davis. Mentions too have to go to the relatively unknown newcomer Carla Lane as Noodle, the young sidekick for Wonka, and a great main supporting actor, giving 100% to her role and driving the story and emotions along as a duo with Chalamet. She's also the one we kind of root for as well, and the positive energy of Wonka and his drive to succeed pushes Noodle to work with him and make something better for herself. She's a very likeable new character to the Wonka franchise, and one I'd hope would continue to stay should a sequel happen. This film will work wonders for her future as an actor too. We get Jim Carter as Abacus Crunch, and Jim Carter, as you all know him, is Carlson from Downton Abbey, sans the butler role. He's a likeable gent of an English actor and displays the exact same reliable qualities in this too that you've seen before, but it's good. I also have to mention Patterson Joseph as a great and different version of Slugworth, and Keegan-Michael Kay as the Chief of Police. Both of these give great performances, Slugworth being the manipulative main villain, if we could call him that, obsessed with the downfall of Wonka, and the Chief of Police, occasionally working with Slugworth and providing some great subtle comedy in every scene he's in. And it was that kind of side character that I tend to like in a film, something you don't expect, something that's not major to the film, but they're just great every time they're on, and when it's done well, it's really good like he is in this. Overall, though, the film looks bright and colourful when needed, grimy and rotten when not needed and away from the city glamour, and it provides some great set pieces, inventive ideas, and a killer cast to put it all together. I had fun with this, but there were a few areas that didn't sit too well with me, and they are major parts of the entire film, perhaps the bulk of the film itself in some respects. So what didn't work? Well, this was without doubt not the film I expected at all. Sometimes that's a good thing, but not on this occasion. The big thing for me that is the most of this film is that by and large, Wonka is a musical. Not like the Gene Wilder version where it has the odd song scattered here and there. It's more like Beauty and the Beast kind of musical with large portions of songs and dance numbers to flashy bright glitter and coloured ribbons, the whole town, everyone on screen suddenly joining and dance along, then stopping and kind of back to work. Think Greatest Showman and you're about there. I expected some songs, but it was a lot. I enjoyed a couple of the performances, but most I won't really remember, and I'm sure they won't become classics either. I just don't think they're good. They're just not that catchy. It's not really my thing, this, unless it's done exceptionally well. And to be fair, Chalamet, he himself does it well. He sings and dances with great ability in every song, but for a movie, it's just one after another that I just didn't expect in the way it does it. You may also have noticed I've not yet mentioned Hugh Grant as the Oompa Loompa, and yet you've probably seen him in the trailers and curious about him as well. And that's because I was quite surprised to find that he's barely in this film. His screen time must be no more than maybe 10 or 15 minutes at most if you add it all together. And while I like Hugh Grant and his comedy too, it's a real shame they didn't have more of him. If you took him out of this completely, it wouldn't change the film in the slightest, not one bit. He's in there just to service the classic role and really nothing more. I liked him when he was on screen, but it was a real shame for me. I suppose similar could be said for Rowan Atkinson too, who I'm a big fan of, so I was curious about his role as the vicar. He even has less time as the vicar than the Oompa Loompa does, and it's a shame because he's equally great. I'd rather these kind of roles be played by unknowns if they're going to be so short and come and lead to a bit of disappointment. If it's a cameo role, then fair enough, but these are just a bit more than a cameo, so it tends to disappoint when it's good actors and they're drastically underused. There was also a sense watching this that I couldn't quite put my finger on, but it kind of just dawned on me about halfway through or 3/4 of the way that we have all these people on screen essentially in two locations. You've got the kind of the grimy, grotty part, and then you've got the inner town part and the glitz and glamour with all these dance numbers and songs, and it just kind of clicked. It just feels like you're watching a London West End show live on stage. You've got that kind of forced acting and that forced voices from most of the cast. Not Wonka, not Noodle, and the workers. They're a bit different, but everybody else just seems like they're in a play on stage. You could mirror the entire film as a stage show, bar the odd scene, and it'd just work pretty much identically. A good show, though, let me add, but not a great movie. And this is why, again, it's not what I expected. The acting of the chocolate maker bad guys especially, the ones like played by Matt Lucas, for example, and Matthew Bainton, they were hyper-forced acting and really extra over-dramatised accents of a posh, snooty manner that, again, they'd fit on stage facing an audience as they spoke, then look back to their kind of person that they're working with and back to the audience. But it just doesn't seem to work the same in a film. Finally, I mentioned about this at the start being a very clear prequel and more on that later. And that was the other part I didn't expect. I knew this was a prequel going in, but this is a real prequel. It's almost a prequel to a film or two before the kind of classic Chocolate Factory story that you know. It has no connection with the usual, and as such, calling it a prequel might lead some people to think this is what happened just before the factory and everything else. But I think it's a little bit more than that. I think there's a good film or two in front of this before you get to the factory tour and the golden tickets and Grandpa Joe, etc. So think of it more as a prequel of sorts. Just don't go expecting it to lead into everything that you usually know. This one's very early days. Also, just to add, the many young kids in the auditorium looked fed up, and I would agree. I sat there at one point thinking, this is not really going to appeal to kids much. It's probably just a bit boring for them. And cue then them running up and down the aisles to the toilets, on their phone and so on in my auditorium. It's just not magical enough to be great for kids. It doesn't hold the unusual and intriguing wonder of the other Wonka films. With the exception of Noodle, it's a full-on adult cast. So again, kids don't have the quirky characters to relate to that we had in the Depp and Wilder versions, such as Mike TV, Veruca Salt and Violet Beauregard. I'm just letting you know and putting it out there. Maybe, kids 11, 12, early teens would enjoy it. I don't know, but maybe check some other reviews before you shell out a lot of money for a family ticket. I'm just kind of letting you know on that. All in all, if Wonka was a chocolate bar, think more a Yorkie or a Nestle Crunch rather than your classic kind of Galaxy or Lindt. They're nice, but they're just not quite hitting the mark. So my final thoughts, and I found this really hard to give a bit of a final score out of 5 to. I'm going to give this one a 3 out of 5. To be fair, I'm tipping ever so close to the 4 out of 5 because Chalamet was excellent, as was most of the cast as well. But it just wasn't what I thought it was going to be. I had a good night and I smiled at it. It was nice, but I think it's something I'll forget pretty quickly, and I'll just maybe watch it again when it's on telly. So if you want to go and watch Wonka, should you take a mate, a date, maybe the kids, or even stay up late and watch it on streaming? I'd maybe take a date to this one. I think for the kids, I'd maybe save this for the streaming. It's a tough one, but as I said in my kind of didn't work points, I don't think it's going to suit all kids, this one. Certainly not young kids. I don't know. I might be wrong with that. But it didn't seem to do it in the screening I was in, and I was thinking that as well before I even noticed it. But I had this kind of good 6 or 7 out of 10 time with this and a few decent smiles. So get yourself off, watch it. If you're a fan of Wonka, I do think you'll like it. Just know what you're going in to see. So what did you think of Wonka? Leave a comment below. But until next time, keep smiling, peeps.